Hello, everybody. Again, it's Mary O'Sullivan, and I'd like to continue reading from my new book called The Leader You Don't Want to Be. This is a book about leadership behavior that you do not want to emulate or repeat. So I'm going to read today a little bit about corporate soap operas or drama in the workplace. And this is from chapter 13 of my book. And I always like to start off with a quote. This is one of my favorites from Plato. Wise men talk because they have something to say. Fools because they have to say something. From the time of the ancient Greeks through the age of YouTube and TikTok, people love drama. Drama is not just the stuff of soap operas, movies, television, and politics. Wherever you find people, you'll find drama. And for all of us who pack ourselves up every day and trudge off to earn a living, we've learned how dramatic a place work can be. Work is the place where you will see and hear occurrences that even Hollywood couldn't make up. No one would find credibility in the stories. Here is the drama of Jackie's story. Management and other plans. Several years ago, while at a training session with a major manufacturing company, a colleague alerted Jackie that in a conversation with their mutual boss, he was told that management had other plans for her. This news did not sit well with Jackie or with her colleague, and he was totally overloaded, and at that time, she was taking over much of his extra work. He was in charge of cross-training the whole department on a new complex software platform, but had been given no relief from any of his other existing responsibilities. This way of doing business was not uncommon in that environment. As the workload increased, the number of people doing the work would often decrease. Jackie found this news ironic as she had just returned from 2 weeks of training in the specific area for which she was hired. It made no sense to move her after the company invested thousands of dollars in travel and living, plus the course itself, only to move her someplace else where she had no expertise. It seemed crazy. Well, not really, as it turned out. Later, her boss stopped by her office, and after some brief chit-chat regarding her trip, he said they needed to talk and took her into a conference room. By this time in her career, she'd learned not to react to such pop-up meetings because after years of these mostly useless events, she thought, why spend her psychic energy, useless as it was, unless it was an actual emergency. She practiced composure and let her inner Zen govern her emotions. Her boss had a reputation for weakness, so it was probable that he'd slip up and blow the conversation anyway. Whatever the news, she kept in mind to take whatever the news was by practicing executive presence and remain unruffled. Some additional chit-chat continued, and Jackie finally asked him to get to the point, as she had a lot of work piling up on her desk, given that that was her first day back from training. He told her there was an opportunity that had just come up. Jackie replied, "Oh, an opportunity to excel?" He grinned sheepishly and said there was a job in planning and that he had set it up for her to talk to the planning manager later that day. In manufacturing parlance, planning refers to the planning for production, which, as she later learned, means making sure the right piece parts were released to the manufacturing floor at the right time. As he talked, the boss spun the opportunity as a way to learn a different part of the business. He went on to say he had been in planning about 15 years ago, so he didn't want to describe what planning was now, as it could be completely different than it was in his day. Despite her pressing him for more details, he could not give any further information. His circumlocution was a red flag, and she took note of his evasiveness. It certainly was a signal to pay attention to whatever came next. She even thought of taking a positive look at this proposal. She began to fool herself into thinking this might indeed be a good move for her. While not sure exactly what planning meant, she felt that a change might open opportunities for promotion and add to her resume to show more varied experience in the sector. But as she thought more about it, it seemed to be confusing, a really confusing time to be making this kind of change for her. It didn't seem to make any sense since the company had just invested several $1,000s by training her in a completely different skill set. Regardless of her confusion, she was asked to refresh her resume and send it along as her manager offered to make the call to the hiring manager, and she complied. He was supposed to make the call that same day, but an interesting series of events began to unravel her boss's ill-conceived plan. First of all, it was foolish of her boss to assume that Jackie wouldn't ask around about this move. After spending well over 10 years in the company, she had formed trusting relationships with people at all levels who were willing to pass on information. Also, given the fact that in any social group, people are going to talk and share information, it was a poor assumption on the boss's part that Jackie would just accept a major career change out of nowhere. All employees in the company knew how vital it was to find out information via the grapevine. In this case, making a few phone calls, stopping in people's offices, and generally asking around the tiny coffee shop and dining center. Jackie could rely on the grapevine because secret moves like this often affected people's jobs, the location they were assigned to, and promotion possibilities. Employees talked because management often sprang surprise decisions upon them, just like this new opportunity was sprung on her. No one likes to be surprised. Being surprised could undermine a career without being tapped into the right people who fed precious information. The unofficial undercurrent wave of information flowed freely through the organization to counter management's secrecy attempts. It seemed there was a friendly fly on every wall. So I'm just going to wrap this up by telling you that what Jackie did was make a few phone calls to a former colleague from another company who is now the president of this particular company. And he pulled a few strings, and long story short, Jackie's boss got in trouble for trying to move her around when she was doing a perfectly good job where she was. Obviously, there was another agenda at hand. So again, this is Mary O'Sullivan. My new book is The Leader You Don't Want to Be. It's about bad leadership behavior and poor judgment and how to avoid those getting caught up in those traps. And we're going to roll this out on April 27th. That's Amazon launch day. You can join me. I have postings about my Facebook Live, and there'll be prizes and lots of goodies to talk about during the day. So meanwhile, get this book, The Leader You Don't Want to Be. There are more really interesting stories like the one we just talked about. Have a great day, everybody.